soy egresado de la maestría petrolera de la Universidad Cedip. El día de hoy vamos a ver un video acerca de la refinación, el futuro que nos espera en México sobre la refinación y sus combustibles limpios. México tiene la delantera en este tema, incluso algunas de las compañías extranjeras han tomado tecnología de México para implementarla en sus refinerías. Vamos a ver en este video un pequeño porción de lo que es un amplio mar sobre este tema de la refinación, lo importante que es y lo que nos espera en México y nuestro futuro con los combustibles limpios.
Sleep, the blood, sweat, and tears shake off my past. I knew it, but I see it at last. And now that's why I climb in the walls. All I see, the smell of the smoke, the tears that they choke.
Cars are a big part of American culture. They're as different as the people who make up our country. And when it comes to choosing a car, the options are pretty much limitless. But cars aren't the only thing we have unlimited choice in.
Americans have incredible choice in the electronic devices that they use. They have incredible choice in the clothes that they wear. They have incredible choice of the restaurants that they go to. Incredible choice in grocery stores. Incredible choice in religious denominations that they want to practice. But in the United States, for most of the last 100 years, Americans have had no fuel choice.
When it comes to one of our most important needs, oil, our lack of choice has serious consequences. This monopoly on our fuel supply is hurting us much worse than we realize. When oil was first discovered, it was refined into kerosene for lamps. It was used for illumination, not transportation. A young Cleveland businessman saw great potential. He realized that drilling for oil was risky, but refining oil was steady money, so he built his first refinery. His name was John D. Rockefeller. His company became known as Standard Oil. By 1880, Rockefeller controlled over 90% of the U.S. oil business. Standard Oil became a monopoly that charged exorbitant prices. And eventually, the public got fed up. They demanded that President Theodore Roosevelt take action. He announced antitrust indictments against Standard Oil, and in 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court found the Standard Oil Company guilty of monopolizing the fuel market. The ruling splintered it into 34 powerful independent oil companies. And Rockefeller, who had stock in all the newly formed oil companies, became the richest man of the modern age.
Crude oil comes in train car loads or it comes in a pipeline. You cook that oil, and you cook it under pressure, like you would cook food in a pressure cooker. As that oil cooks in a refinery, what's in that crude oil barrel separates, then it goes into the gasoline stage.
There's no doubt this will be called the oil age. We really never stop to think about it, but this entire civilization is made out of and moved by crude oil.
Oil is everywhere in our lives. We know it's in our vehicles. We're used to using it to fill up the tank. Oil is in medicines. Oil lubricates almost everything that moves in our economy. Oil is in our clothes. Oil is in the rug you're standing on or in the material of the chair you're sitting in. It's in every piece of plastic that's made.
We live in a society in which we rely upon personal mobility as the primary means of transportation.
For 6 decades, we had this freedom, and the world had this freedom. And suddenly in the 1970s, that freedom came to a screeching halt.
Egypt and Syria are at war with Israel today.
In 1973, Egypt and Syria attacked Israel. Out of this ensuing conflict, OPEC seized the opportunity to cut the supply of oil worldwide.
The oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon.
The threat was economic. If you don't change your foreign policy, we will cut off your oil supply, and average Americans will not be able to do their basic life activities.
It had devastating effects on the American economy. It caused mass unemployment. There were lines to any job that anybody had to offer.
We would have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because this one station for the entire community. It made such an impact on me that I've spent my entire career thinking about this problem. How do we solve the problem that OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, this cartel that was created, how do we get to a place where they can't control the destiny of an average American?
OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries at Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, etc., sit on 78% of conventional oil reserves. So we're facing a situation in which this market, the oil market, is dominated by a cartel. Now, at the same time, our cars can only use oil.
After the shock of the oil crisis, instead of building efficient cars and diversifying fuel types, America chose a different path. It increased the number of countries it imports oil from. And like someone protecting their gas station, America built military bases near almost every major oil installation in the Middle East.
America pays about $500 billion a year to maintain military forces whose primary mission is intervention in the Persian Gulf. That expenditure is about 10 times what we pay to buy oil from the Persian Gulf. Of course, we have other interests in the region. It's not all about oil, but it's hard to believe that we would have fought a couple of wars there and sent lots of troops there if Kuwait just grew broccoli.
If we could get away from sending our sailors and airmen and soldiers to go defend somebody else's oil fields, you can't even put a price tag on that. There are some people who naively say, well, no, those forces are there to defend democracy. But if that was really true, then we would be every place where there is a problem. And we're not every place where there is a problem. We are only those places where there is a oil problem.
America is no longer the only country with an unquenchable thirst for oil. And as global demand for oil skyrockets, so will the price.
I was here in '86. The very first morning I was in China, I saw a sea of thousands of bicycles. 7 o'clock in the morning, making their way down the main avenue. No cars.
Once it became clear that the Chinese were going to build a consumer society, China's production of automobiles just shoots into the stratosphere.
At the end of 2009, GM sold more cars here in China than it did in the United States. That was a real psychological wake-up call for General Motors. Bicycles are off the road, and it's been replaced with the world's largest car market. In 2000, China sold less than 1 million cars. This year, the number will be over 15 million. China's scouring the world for sources of oil, not just for today, but for the next 10 and 20 years. Now, even though they're making these investments, they're saying, according to our projections, that's still not enough.
If we reach a point where oil becomes scarce, or maybe not as plentiful, and we're all competing for that oil, then the people who get the oil out of the ground are going to be willing to sell it to whoever is willing to pay the most for that oil. Right now, China sits on the largest cash hoard of any country in the world. The current system is not sustainable.
So if our foreign supplies of oil aren't enough, why don't we just produce more at home?
The problem they ran into is while there was a lot of oil, it was very, very dense shale rock. Geologists have known that shale rock holds a lot of oil for a long, long time. We just didn't have the technologies to be able to release it. Just in the last few years, we've come up with techniques that are very effective.
If you have your gas or oil trapped in isolated little pores, you have to fracture the rock in order to create channels for this to flow. This is done by pumping mixtures of water and sand and various other things down into the formations, which then cracks the rock, and that's called hydrofracturing.
The process is also known as fracking.
We've moved from being the #9 producer in oil in the country to #2.
We're going down to 10,500 some feet. That's where the oil is. Typical wells around here produce anywhere from 400 to 800 barrels per day of oil. Chasing the almighty dollar, the American dream.
In the year 2000, we were drilling about 5,000 wells per year. And with higher price of oil and new technology, we're now drilling 25,000 wells per year.
The most productive time of an oil field is when it's brand new, because it shrinks from then on. It declines. And so you have to keep finding more and more and more.
In the United States, we represent a very small portion of the global population, something like 4 or 5%. But we use 20% of the oil in the world.
In the U.S., we produce less than 8 million barrels of oil a day, in a country that needs about 18 million barrels a day, in a world that needs about 88 million barrels of oil a day.
We're not producing 5 times as much oil from 5 times as many wells. We're drilling wells that are more expensive. We're drilling more of them. Essentially, we have to run as fast as we can just to stay in the same place.
And what we've got to come to grips with is that it's the end of the oil age. This is the sunset.
We've got environmental crisis. We've got climate change. We've got political instability. We've been weakened as a nation. Our pockets have been robbed. $1 billion a day is leaving from our coffers and going overseas. There is no sense to any of this until we have a moment of truth with ourselves and our own policymakers. This country is destined and condemned to not only be addicted to oil, but addicted to all the terrible trappings that come with oil. Where there's a will, there will be a way. There is no will. Until that moment comes, there will be no way.
But there is a way. The way to break up a monopoly is with competition. And competition can only happen when people can make choices. What if one of our choices could be to use a car that doesn't use any oil at all? Electricity. Elon Musk made shopping on the internet a reality with his company, PayPal. His more recent ventures include a space company and the creation of an electric luxury car.
When I was like about 12 or 13, I learned that you could be an inventor, and I was reading about people like Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. So I thought, well, if I could invent things that people found useful, that would be a great thing to do. What we're really showing with the Model S is that it's possible to create a compelling electric car that's aesthetically appealing, has long range, good performance, and that competes with the best of the premium gasoline cars. That was something that the industry did not believe was possible.
The success of the Tesla S prompted other car makers to roll a fleet of new electric cars onto America's roads. Brazil is booming. Part of the reason it's booming is because at every pump in Brazil, people have a choice.
What we have today is a carryover from the 70s, and it's a solution.
In 75, on the first oil crisis, we decided to replace oil by biofuels. We imported 90% of our oil at that time.
It was decided that every service station had to have an ethanol pump.
With almost the same physical size as the United States, Brazil is the most successful gasoline replacement program in the world.
Você fica assim conversando com ele.
Mas aí o senhor vai ficar ouvindo a minha introdução, muito chato, o senhor vai ter que ficar ouvindo a minha voz. Melhor tirar e...
Que tínhamos capacidade de produzir e que tínhamos capacidade de ter um combustível menos poluente. Começou-se a produzir no Brasil, então, carro flex fuel.
With the choice of fuel now at every pump, the next task was to create a car that could take advantage of that. Enter the flex fuel car.
Carro flex fuel, que você pode utilizar 100% de gasolina, 100% de etanol, 50%, a mistura que você quiser fazer, e o carro funciona adequadamente.
Ethanol is alcohol that's made by fermenting sugars. Ethanol can be made from a wide variety of substances, but in Brazil, they use a crop they've been growing for 500 years.
Ethanol is not just any competitor, it is the better fuel. It has always been the better fuel.
Here's the thing about alcohol. Anyone can make it. I mean, making alcohol is mankind's second oldest profession. We have so many things we can use for making alcohol. We can grow things like beets. We can grow sweet sorghum, the agave plant, mesquite, buffalo gourds.
In the United States today, alcohol fuel, or ethanol, is distilled at hundreds of refineries all over the country. They produce 15 billion gallons every year. That's 10% of our fuel. In fact, it's probably in your fuel tank right now. There's another alcohol fuel that's so versatile, you can make it just about anywhere. And we mean anywhere. Dr. Robert Zubrin is a scientist working with NASA to find the best fuel to use on missions to Mars. His choice was methanol. Methanol, also known as wood alcohol, is the simplest alcohol you can make. Mars has both water and carbon dioxide, and that's all you need to make methanol.
Methanol is an alcohol. It is a liquid. It looks like water. It's much better than gasoline in terms of air pollution. To give you a sense of how much cleaner methanol is than gasoline, we're going to conduct a little experiment here where we're going to burn the two of them side by side. This is methanol, and as you can see, it's as clear as water. And this is gasoline, which has a slight yellow tinge. Methanol, gasoline. First, let's light the methanol. You can see the methanol is burning right now. This is an extremely clean burning flame. Now let's take a look at gasoline. By comparison to methanol, this is filthy. It's got soot, it's got particulate emissions. That's what you're putting up into the air when you burn gasoline. And look at the residue. Methanol, there's no residue at all. The materials that can be used to make methanol are extremely plentiful and cheap. It can be made from anything that either is or was once a plant. It can be made from coal. It can be made from natural gas. Right now, the United States is having a natural gas production boom. We have so much natural gas that we are flaring it so much that you can see it from space.
According to the Department of Energy, as a result of fracking, production of natural gas in the United States is projected to increase. And by 2020, there could be enough additional natural gas to replace half of our imported fuel with methanol.
So really, there's enough to replace all of it.
1 billion tons of biomass makes about 210 billion gallons of methanol. But to be conservative, let's say we could only convert 50%. That still equals enough fuel to run half of the cars in America. The cost to build methanol refineries? It's about $420 billion. But that's less than 1 year of operations in the Persian Gulf. Now, you can't go as far on a gallon of methanol. So for example, if methanol costs $1.20 per gallon, the relative cost would be about $2 a gallon for domestically produced fuel that's made from a multitude of sources. For example, today it's illegal for commercial operations to install flex fuel kits, even though you can install one yourself. And pouring anything into your car not specifically designated by the manufacturer is also technically illegal. People are starting to realize to make the changes needed, they can't rely on government. They can't rely on corporations. They have to rely on themselves. While oil companies profit from a one-fuel system, the people suffer because of it. And those people are starting to channel their anger into action.
Let's do for ourselves what the rest of the world is doing for themselves by opening up choice. If people want fuels from natural gas, people want fuels from biofuels, people want batteries, let people choose what fuels they want to buy. It is as American can be.
Everybody should have the right to choose the future they want. And the choice for a better future begins at the pump.